It is difficult, if not impossible, for us to put ourselves into the mindset of the earliest Christians, like those in the church in Corinth. Lurking beneath all of Paul's letters is the question of Christ's imminent return and what that means for people's lives. Apparently, some thought it required a life of complete sexual abstinence, even for married couples. Paul's answer is eye-opening. Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas, and this is your daily devotional for Friday, March 21st, 2025. As I've said before, most of what we read in Paul's letters is one side of a two-sided conversation. Either he writes about ongoing discussions between him and the church, or in some cases he responds directly to something someone has written to him. Today's reading from 1 Corinthians is apparently a case of the church writing to him with a specific question. Perhaps they wanted his input in a disagreement they were having. We don't know exactly, but what we do know is that they made a statement in a letter to him that he felt merited a response. Here's what he writes. Now concerning the matter about which you wrote, quote, "It is well for a man not to touch a woman," end quote. But because of cases of sexual immorality, each man should have his own wife and each woman her own husband. The husband should give to his wife her conjugal rights, and likewise the wife to her husband. For the wife does not have authority of her own body, but the husband does. Likewise, the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. Do not deprive one another, except perhaps by agreement for a set time, to devote yourselves to prayer, and then come together again, so that Satan may not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. This I say by way of concession, not of command. I wish that all were as I myself am, but each has a particular gift from God, one having one kind and another a different kind. To the unmarried and the widows I say that it is well for them to remain unmarried as I am, but if they are not practicing self-control, they should marry, for it is better to marry than to be aflame with passion. As I suggested above, it is almost impossible for us to put ourselves in the mindset of the early Christians who expected Jesus to return just any day. But it is safe to assume that their whole life would have been focused on that expectation. Perhaps some of them believed that even sexual relations between husbands and wives might have drawn their focus away from Christ's return. Maybe they thought it would be a distraction. But Paul was not having any of it. He was too grounded in the realities of life, dare I say, in the facts of life, to indulge that kind of thinking. He knew that human beings don't stop being human just because of some religious belief, no matter how deeply held that belief. People do not simply stop thinking romantic thoughts. People do not simply stop having erotic desires just because they believe Christ is coming soon. So for Paul, the question was not whether people should be celibate. It was a question of the appropriate place for sexual intimacy and expression. Husbands should not deny wives, and wives should not deny husbands on the grounds that they believed Christ was returning soon. I think if Paul were here today, he might say something like, "Look, people, you're more distracted by trying to remain celibate than you are by maintaining your ordinary marital relations." Paul was no prude. True, he thought a life of celibacy and singleness was the highest form of life under the circumstances, but he also knew that not everyone shared the gift of voluntary celibacy. Some years ago, one of my professors in seminary, one who had recently retired but had come back to teach a course, told us a telling story in which he appealed to this very passage. When he was a student at the seminary, Union Seminary in Richmond, Virginia, many years before, students could not be married. They had to be single men. Yes, they were all men at that time. But this professor had a fiancée and didn't particularly want to wait until graduation to marry her. He took his case to the faculty, who initially denied his request to get married. But then he quoted them the last line of this passage: "It is better to marry than to be aflame with passion." Apparently, the faculty could not argue with Paul, so they granted his request, reasoning that he would be a better student not pining away, but one who is able to enjoy the benefits of marriage. Does sincere faith in Jesus Christ require us to maintain a life of celibacy? Absolutely not. We do not cease to be human just because we profess faith in Jesus Christ. We bring our whole selves into the faith, even our desires and passions. What matters is how we maintain a life of faithfulness within that faith. Tomorrow, sometimes Paul speaks for God, but sometimes he speaks only for himself. But for now, may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.